Hi, this is Professor Rujo Marina with some notes on Objective 3 in Chapter 1. That life cycle is very important. And one thing you can notice from looking at it is change is a normal part of life. As you see here, the green curve indicates your level of income over time. Clearly, if your parents were very corporate, they might have laid you off quite early as they were cutting expenses. But they didn't because they love you, like all parents do. They love their kids. But as you see, people start earning money when they start working full time, etc. For the most part, when you are starting out work, you're going to be earning a lower amount of income because, well, you don't have enough, oftentimes, experience, education or experience, or any combination of that to do certain jobs. So it just takes a little bit of time to gain experience. But as you do, look what happens to that green line. You'll see that the income will increase. One thing you'll know about this income line is that it peaks between about 45 and 60 some years old. Okay. Most people are making the most that they'll ever make in terms of their annual income during that period of time. But that's not true for everybody. And again, these are just averages at best. Notice that income starts to slope down after retirement age. And that's because when you stop working, um, you know, you're not going to be having that paycheck come in. You're going to be dependent on whatever types of retirement income you have planned for yourself. Okay. Some people don't plan very much, so they don't have a lot. Some people plan quite well and they're making a pretty good income even when they're retired. But nonetheless, income usually goes down at that time. So, what you might not know is between the time you start working and the time you actually retire, for some people, particularly with a bachelor's degree, they're going to be making roughly about 1.8 to $2.5 million during that whole time span. For folks that have graduate degrees, it's more of over $4 million in this entire lifespan. Um, Even with those with high school educations, as long as they're employed most of this time, they'll be making upwards of close to $1 million in their lifetime. So, in terms of making money through your lifetime, you'll be making a lot of money through your lifetime. The goal is to make sure you keep a lot of it or make it grow, over time. But you notice there's lots of different stages that are listed here. First, the asset acquisition stage is where we start buying assets. What do we mean by that? Well, you might own your first car. You might have a bank account for sure, so you might have liquid assets. You might have some personal property like car, furniture, other types of things. You might start purchasing real property like land or a house. Um, and certainly you might start making some investments. And so you might have some investments as well. So those are all assets. Assets are things that we own. And some of those things that we own will increase in value over time, some will not. So it really sort of depends on the type of asset. The next stage we'll look at here as your book continues is this idea of liability and insurance planning. Most of the time when you're buying an asset, like buying a house or buying a car, you're gonna be getting a loan to buy that. Most people take out loans to buy houses, take out loans to buy cars and other assets. Well, that loan has to be paid back. Okay. One thing that's for sure. So, understanding how to manage debt is another very important part of this. Oftentimes, these assets are valuable. You want to make sure they're protected. There are certain risks, and those risks can be covered with insurance. So, insurance planning helps cover risks both from losses of value in assets um, and also, believe it or not, from income as well. So, when you want your income to stay in this curve, there's insurance that makes sure that you won't risk losing a lot of that income over time. Then you have stages where you have saving and investment. This can start very early. And one of the most important parts of this in one of the exhibits in the book is understanding that over time, money can grow. Okay, the time value of money, compounding, is a very important financial concept to understand. And it takes time to compound. Okay. And the earlier you start, the more, the better it will be, the better it will work for you. And so you'll be seeing this idea. And of course, investing usually means you're going to be accumulating various investments that you hope increase in value over time. And most of the time, this is where we start talking about stocks or bonds or mutual funds and things like that. Okay. When you get a job, most employers are how Americans get certain benefits like healthcare, health insurance. They might also get life insurance from their employer. They might get access to tuition reimbursement, discounts, other types of issues that benefit them. So, knowing how to maximize the employee benefits to making sure that you're taking advantage of them. That's one of the most important employee benefits too, is saving for retirement through a 401k plan, for example. All those benefits are very, very important in financial planning because they often are benefits of a financial nature that you need to look at. Tax planning is not something we cover in a short course in winter or summer, but we do in the regular semester. But taxes are very important because income, anything you've earned, and that could be because you worked for it or because you actually have assets that have earned income for you. That type of earnings, these are taxed. And so tax planning really comes in to develop strategies to either defer that tax to a future year. So you pay it later at some point, but later, and or minimize the amount of tax you pay. Sometimes the reason you want to defer the tax, pay it later, is because at that time you think your tax rate will be lower. And so that's part of tax planning. Again, we're not going to be covering much of this in this course because of the shortness of it, but we do in the normal semester. And then retirement and estate planning, we all want to get to the point in our life where we retire, which often means to most people you don't want to work anymore, but you do want a paycheck coming in. So that retirement planning is very important to make sure that you can reach a day where you do not have to work anymore, but you're still getting paid. You still get a check coming in. So that's it's not too difficult. It's just hard to plan for some people, but that's important to do. And then once you have reached sort of that end stage where you are retired, you have a lot of assets. You might have a home, you might have businesses, you might have other types of things. You want to make sure you're passing that along after your death to the people you want to have it, and that's really what estate planning is all about. Okay, so all of those are covered as they're listed here. I wanted to go and look at the Exhibit 1.5 that shows you again um, the rate of growth in time. Now here you have just a simple $1,000 that is put aside into an account that pays interest. The bottom line shows an account that pays 4% interest. The top line shows an account that pays 6% interest. So as you see, that $1,000, again, the first few years, it's really not growing all that rapidly. It's still growing, but it's not growing all that rapidly. But look what happens over time. This is why the time value of money is important. Over time, your interest starts earning interest. And just that little bit of a difference between 4% and 6% over time, in a period of 40 years, can mean a lot of extra money, okay, that you make. So this is important to look at. Compounding works over a long period of time. So you can't get the compounding in a 10-year period that you can get in a 30 or 40-year period, because then in this case, your interest is earning interest. And that's where you make lots of money. And you see, it takes an enormous amount of time for that to happen. So that's a very important aspect um, to this chapter that you need to be aware of. These special concerns, we've talked a little bit about the two income family as one of those unexpected benefits, but has these unexpected consequences. The big consequence with the two income family is that they spend all of it. So, if you have a couple, person A is working full time, person B is working full time in this couple, and at every single dollar that comes into their household, they're spending, they're using. So, what happens when one of those people in the couple loses their job? Or during unexpected bad times to the company, their hours get cut, so their pay gets cut. This is one of the biggest problems, is that if you're basing your entire life on two incomes, as soon as one of those incomes is lost or damaged, everything falls apart. Everything falls apart. And so that's super important to understand. um, you know it's one of those things where there's nothing wrong with living on one income, and using that other income as a savings, a way to get wealthy quicker. And a lot of people are, they just, again, just our society. Like, we live in a consumer society, in a capitalist economy. They want you to spend your money. Okay. And that means, if this couple, uh, owns a 3 or 4 bedroom colonial in a wonderful neighborhood for $350,000, then you should too. Well, just because you can afford a house for 350 doesn't mean you should buy one. Again, part of it is understanding what's enough, and part of that is learning about your plans. If your plan is to get wealthy, then spending all your money is not a way to do that. Right? And so, unfortunately, with the two income issue, it's a two income trap in essence, because people get married, they make that much more money, and then they spend it. When one person loses their job, the whole thing comes crashing down. So it's not a good thing, for sure. Okay. Another thing is learning that your where you work and managing those benefits are critically important. So, retirement planning, making sure you have enough insurance, making sure you have, maybe assistance for education, for childcare, things like that. Super important part of your financial life and financial picture, and should be looked at quite clearly, and taken advantage of. And then the last thing that's listed here is understanding that the economy goes through good times and bad. You've already lived through, in most of your lifetime, we just had a huge recession because of COVID, a lot of people losing their jobs. You go back to 2007, 2008, we had a huge collapse in the economy because of the housing crisis. You go back to 2001, we had another big, deep recession, and so forth. This is part, the economy has times where it's doing well, and other times it's not doing so well. When it's doing well, everyone has jobs, everyone's got money, everyone's out spending. And then when it's not doing well, of course, people suffer. So it's very important to understand a few things. Number one, always live below your means. So make sure that whatever you're making, you're not spending more than you're making. And second is not to panic when these types of things happen. The stock market goes down a couple of thousand points. Oh, well, big deal. Guess what? It went down 10,000 points only to come back up by 20,000. So, it doesn't matter over time. Markets do quite well. If you look at them in 10 and 20-year periods of time, markets do extremely well. If you're only looking at them by the day, by the month, by the year, you'll see a lot of volatility and people panic. But if you look at them in 10 and 20-year time intervals, stock market, other investments have done quite well long term. So have a long term outlook. And that's a good way to manage your finances in rough times. And then, of course, when I told you everything is about change, life is about change. Your life is never going to be the same at any point in time. You might get married, might have children, you might get divorced, you might get married again. Um, you're going to be getting older. Things are going to change in that regard. You might have a death in the family. You're going to retire at some point in time. You might need to go back to school. Change is normal. People panicking about it is not. And people being surprised by change, that's not really normal because change is normal. I mean, change happens over time. It just happens to everybody. I didn't wake up as a 57-year-old. I started like everyone else at birth, and over time, boy, things have changed. And so, that's the way it goes. That is life. That is common. One thing we can do to manage all of those changes is to continue to save. Part of what financial planners want and advise clients is to continue to have an emergency fund, to put money aside in an account for savings sake. And that means basically that if any of these changes occur, and they will, you don't need to panic. You don't need to worry so much because you'll have some flexibility financially to deal with these emergencies and these types of changes that are maybe unexpected at the time, but just part of a normal life. And lastly, the book introduces you to different financial planners. There are basically two types of financial planners, one that get paid by commission only. So the only reason they make money is to sell you stuff. Um, Financial planners sell you insurance, sell you investments, sell you other things. Not the best way of dealing with somebody, knowing that they have to sell you something to make a living. The other way is something called a fee-only planner, and basically they charge you a fee based on how complex your financial situation is. They're going to put a plan together, organize things for you, and they charge you based on that. It doesn't mean that they couldn't recommend and then want to help sell you things like insurance after that's done. So there are folks that can do both. But it's better just to get an objective understanding of where you're at and what you need and take it from there. That's my advice as well. So that is a wrap up of Learning Objective 3.